This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good yawning this morning and welcome back to Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, your station for fresh news, smart talk all day on this International Women's Day. Dear producer, I did not send you a playlist for this morning, but I beg you, and in fact I prefer it this way, when you have a moment, find the songs that you like when you celebrate women, especially Bahamian women. I want to share something with y'all that I was fortunate to see because somebody decided to share it, like with the whole world not knowing where it would end up. So, my colleague, Luby George, had this beautiful post on Facebook yesterday. Luby George's daughter had some homework she had to do, and she had to pick, I think, an influential or top Bahamian artist, woman, a female artist, to celebrate for International Women's Day. And she picked Novi Pierre. Producer, I don't know, you know that song with Visage, Novi and Visage, When I Dared. Play that one. Anyway, the young lady, she wrote this beautiful article highlighting Novi as what she thought is one of the best performing artists, women artists in the Bahamas. And it's not just that the daughter did this beautiful piece, you know, little essay and enjoyed doing the work. It's that the daughter's energy inspired her father, right, to join the celebration and make sure that we could share in it, right? And that's why it was such a beautiful moment, because she inspired. You imagine you're a little child and you inspiring an advocate or an activist to act. That is beautiful. And that's the sort of thing we're looking for on International Women's Day. Now, it is a Wednesday. Most fitting that International Women's Day would fall on a Wednesday. I have a guest in studio, and she doesn't know that this is typically our on-the-clock Guardian Radio AM Man Down Mashup Wednesday, where we bring the two shows together. We have a bit of debate, discussion, hot topic, and usually it's two men against me, one. And so it's great on this International Women's Day that it falls on our Mashup Man Down Wednesday. We're not going to mash up any man, and we're not going to down any man. But it's going to be a great conversation. And so joining me this morning, I'm hoping to have all of the representatives, right? But representatives from the Bahamas Crisis Center. Joining me in studio right now is Miss Shantez Dillard Wilson.
Yes, ma'am.
And she is a volunteer at the Crisis Center.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am.
And hopefully in a few minutes we will have Mrs. Cleopatra Christie joining us. Now, look here, Shantez, I've been waiting all my life. I've been waiting all my life to say, I hope Miss Christie is on her way. because I am so excited to have the Crisis Center on my show. For the third year of trying, y'all are a hot commodity. It's so hard to get y'all for International Women's Day. Third year of trying, I am hoping that Miss Christie can join us today, because the Crisis Center is not just a sort of support organization. It's not a charity by any means. It is actually a powerhouse of an organization. It's been in operation for 40 plus years. This year, I think, marks 41 years. And the Crisis Center and the work of its volunteers and members and staff are responsible for a significant amount of policy shift and cultural shift in the country. While you may not see them or hear them working, you can benefit from the results of their work, their advocacy, their agitation, and their support for women. Good morning, Mr. Nuri.
It's always good to be here, Erin. I just have an interesting show today, and I am happy to participate in it. So happy International Women's Day. I want to say that firstly before I start any conversation.
Yeah, because I know you live in a house full of women.
Pure
You have
women.
to pay tribute.
Yes.
Lest you get in trouble.
I am the last to use the bathroom.
Trained you well.
Very last to use the bathroom. And I've learned how to put down the toilet seat.
Good.
Yes.
This is good cultural shifts.
Yes, I'm training. The small steps, yes.
So, Ms. Wilson, Dillard Wilson, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and your history of advocacy in the Bahamas.
My pleasure. So first of all, happy International Women's Day, Erin, and to all of our listeners out there. I hope that you are doing something special for the women in your life and hopefully for the cause today. Yes, like you said, my name is Shantez Dillard Wilson. I have been a volunteer with the Crisis Center since I was about 19, so that's 16 years or so now.
Nice.
As you well know, Erin, my history with gender advocacy starts very early at the knees of my own wonderful mother, Fran Dillard, shout out mom, who had me coming to dawn meetings, to CAFRA meetings from since I was able to toddle around. So that's where my roots came in. But has been a special chapter, I suppose, in my advocacy. It really allowed me to become much more hands-on in that kind of advocacy. And so my role right now within the Crisis Center is as a hotline volunteer primarily, but also as a gender-based violence educator. So I will often go out on behalf of the Crisis Center and teach people about consent, teach people about gender-based violence, about domestic violence and sexual offenses, how we can work to build consent, how we can combat these things, what are some of the attitudes that cause these things, et cetera, et cetera. In the past, I've been in an advocate role, out there, marching like we did on Saturday with Equality Bahamas, but with the Crisis Center, and also on the PR team. So I've had different roles. But yeah, it's been a real passion, and it's been a real pleasure to both be with the Crisis Center, to have the mentorship of such persons as Dr. Patterson and of course Donna, who's no longer with us. May she rest in peace. And of course, it's a pleasure to be here this morning to discuss International Women's Day with you.
Absolutely. And so let's start here. What does the Crisis Center have planned for International Women's Day?
So they would have participated in the Equality Bahamas International March and Expo this past Saturday, and that was a big part of their roster. And last week, as a lead up to this, they would have been a part of Rotary's. Sorry, I'm not a part of that program, but it's the Road to Peace, I believe.
Okay, right.
They would have participated in the Road to Peace. I know that upcoming they also have, and I'm not sure if this is exactly tied to International Women's Day, but they do have upcoming a discussion about masculinity and masculinity within the Bahamas as well, and essentially how we can approach that to save our boys.
And I imagine that's a part. Are they working in partnership with the Rotary's White Ribbon program, where Rotary encourages men to support actions to end violence against women? I think November 20th is White Ribbon Day.
Yes, and the Crisis Center has paired with them at numerous years in a row. They've been wonderful partners and supporters. This particular event, I can't speak to if that's specifically Rotary. I can get back to you on that.
All right. Well, let's talk about Equality Bahamas' march for a second, because I went on the march. As you could tell, I am still recovering from a little voice and sunburn. You were our lead chanter. And we couldn't have done it without you. For those who Saturday, that just passed, the 4th of March, Equality Bahamas has organized a march and expo. So Equality Bahamas members and volunteers and partnering groups marched from the Eastern Parade, which is the nice big stretch of grass before you get to St. Matthew's on Bay Street, from the Eastern Parade to the Dundas, where an expo took place from about 10 a.m. until 4 in the afternoon. It was a wonderful event. Like I said, Ms. Shantez Dillard-Wilson was in charge of chants, and she authorized Mr. Nuri my favorite chant, which is, "What do we want? Stew fish." When do we want it? Whenever the men them are cooking, because we know that they're busy, but we like how they cook. I thought that was the best chant for the day. I thought it was a great march, because marches are another way to protest. Like, another way to protest is to demonstrate, right? You don't necessarily have to protest what they're doing. You could demonstrate what you want to do instead of what they're doing, right? And so I thought the march was great. We occupied this year. The police. I guess we put our paperwork in time. The police showed up. We had our escort, and we were able to occupy the road, right?
Yes.
And I know that it caused a bit of an inconvenience for some drivers who were unaware of it, but we weren't on the road long.
No, not at all. I think we did the whole route in 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah. And the passerbys were pretty supportive. I think people were impressed.
Yeah, we got some honks, you know, like some people accepted the condoms that we were giving out.
Yeah, absolutely. As a part of the advocacy that some of the groups participate in. I thought it was a great time. The organizations, the Crisis Center doing. So Crisis Center was one of the exhibitors. What were they doing out there?
So the Crisis Center had a stall where they were disseminating information about the Crisis Center, but the Crisis Center services for those who might need those forms of services, and B, information about gender-based violence in a broader sense. So how to recognize symptoms of gender-based violence, how to help a friend, I think was one of the pamphlets that they had out there. Of course, just general information on the cycles for someone who might be going through some of those things, and then also how to recognize signs of abuse in minors as well. So,
awesome. These are absolute resources.
Yes, and all of these resources can be found on the Crisis Center's website. It's bahamascrisiscenter.com. That's center spelled with a T-R-E, not a T-E-R, the British way. Of course, you can call in to the Crisis Center, 280922. That's our hotline, 24 hours, 7 days a week. Or you can email us, bahamascrisiscenter@gmail.com. So you can get those resources at any of those places or anywhere you see the Crisis Center set up, because we set up at fairs and stalls a lot.
Yes, since I'm the only man here on this International Women's Day, so forgive me for this question. Is the Crisis Center only for women, females, or can a male call in for emergency? I have issues. I need some help.
Thank you for asking that question. Once upon a time, 41 years ago, we were christened as the Women's Crisis Center. It has been, I think, a couple of decades since. It has been changed to the Bahamas Crisis Center in recognition that intimate partner violence is not exclusive to women. While it's it's definitely a gendered phenomena, especially within the Bahamas, with the majority of cases, hefty, I think 85% plus of cases being women. So we need to recognize that. There also needs to be a recognition that men, and especially young boys, also experience these kinds of violence, and that they need a place. They especially need a place because it being so stigmatized for men, they need to be able to report and feel safe to report.
And I'm going to be devil's advocate, and because you're here, and because you're well versed on these topics, I've noticed that the definitions, various definitions, are changing. Like the term rape, I understand what rape is, right? It's a simple thing, forced, right? But now they're using this word, this sexual assault, and like it's going to be replaced for this rape. And it's ambiguous, but sexual assault is in reference
Right.
to what rape is?
And not
is
just-
there a varying type thing?
And to piggyback on that, let's all have a conversation about it. I am also wanting to ask, Mrs. Christie more as a policy maker, right, or a policy shaper, and her experience in this work. What's the crisis center's response to the changing language, right, from statutory rape to unlawful sexual intercourse?
It's confusing.
Now, but let's pause and put that on the table. Let's see if we can hear. I know this could be a evoking, emotional conversation. So I want to give callers an opportunity to speak. Good morning, caller. You're on the clock.
Golly, they is talking away so long with you on your panel, Erin.
Good morning, Bremen. How you doing?
I'm all right. We need I'll be better off when we have justice, law, and order in this country, the Bahamas.
Yes, sir.
But I want to ask one of your guests a question. Okay, let me develop it first. She spoke of giving out condoms, right? Now, there was to men or women?
To
Adults.
to both.
To adults.
Okay.
Yeah.
Miss, may I ask you, right? Don't you not consider you are establishing or you are helping to establish immoral living in the Bahamas?
No, I mean, first of all, I'd like to say that giving
Say it
out
again, I hardly
condoms.
can hear you.
So I'd like to first clarify, just for everyone, it was not the crisis center giving out those condoms. Not that we haven't
Yeah.
in the
It's, I
past.
still didn't get you. Would you speak more on the mic?
Okay, I got you, Bremen.
Wait, I wanna.
You wanna respond?
say something else.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, so before I answer your question, I want to establish on air that it wasn't the crisis center giving out those condoms.
Yeah.
It was an amalgamation of persons on the march.
Well, Equality
And it
Bahamas
was
volunteers. Yeah.
Equality Bahamas volunteers, yes.
But you got
Specifically.
yourself involved.
Yes, because I'm also a member of Equality Bahamas, though that's not who I'm speaking on behalf of today. That said, to answer your question, most plainly, no.
No, she's saying that handing out condoms does not necessarily establish sexual immorality. And I don't think it perpetuates it either.
But you're promoting it.
I don't think it
promotes
promotes
safety.
it. Yeah, I
Say it
think
again?
It promotes safety.
I didn't hear you.
it promotes safety, Bremen.
It promotes
safe.
safety. The thing is better way. Stay away from sex.
I mean, I feel you. The safest way to not get pregnant or to not catch an STI is to not have sex at all. I agree with you, Bremen.
Not only
But a
that,
lot of
the
people
Bible
don't
says
care.
that without marriage is fornication.
I get
You're a
you.
young woman, so you shouldn't find yourself,
Bremen-
being a part of a situation as such.
Bremen, I really appreciate the point that you're making, okay? I want you to know that I appreciate it. The approach, though, sort of puts, like, the highlight on this lady as if she is sexually immoral because she was handing out condoms or because she was next to me while I was handing out condoms. Man, Bremen, we get to be a little easy. Basically, people are saying, look, it's not my job to tell you how to live your life, but I can give you tools so that you could make some healthy decisions.
That's exactly what it is. I was
Yeah.
going to say I don't make assumptions about the persons whom I'm giving the condoms out to. I do not know if they're married. I do not know if they're in a relationship. I do not know if they're active. I know that I can offer them a safe way to pursue whatever they're already pursuing, and I do that. And they have the opportunity to accept or not accept. Persons turned away. There were persons that turned away the condoms. There were persons that accepted the condoms. There were married couples, obviously married couples in the car together that accepted the condoms.
Because
So-
married couples use condoms as well. Because children cry and then they come and then they don't never stop crying. And so there are many reasons why people use condoms. There are many reasons why people take free condoms, right? And in fact, when I was giving out condoms, Shantez, I looked at people straight in the eye and say, now remember, get your Grammy permission before you use these, right? Somewhat to break the ice, but also because it reminds people that if you are not old enough, if you are uncomfortable talking about sex, then you perhaps are not prepared to have sex, right?
Yes.
And so that's why I say things like that to people when I hand out condoms. I mean, Bremen, I appreciate Raymond's contribution because there are people who really believe that. The people who believe the mere act of handing out condoms is perpetuating, and not just as perpetuating, but heralding as okay sexual immorality. And I want to say, man, Raymond, I appreciate it. We have to focus not on, I don't think on sexual immorality, but on unhealthy and dangerous sexual behaviors and practices in the community. Right?
That's actually one of the things that the Crisis Center offers or has offered in the past. We usually do it in, I want to say, campaigns of sorts, where we would go into the schools and talk about healthy relationships. So that can be, that encompasses healthy sexual attitudes and everything from, what good touch, bad touch, to, knowing if someone is violating or how to set your boundaries and these kinds of things, to knowing how to recognize red flags and green flags in relationships. Because unfortunately, a few years back, the Bahamas Crisis Center, in conjunction with UB, did a study on high school students about their attitudes towards sex and what we found, sex and relationships. And what we found was that they were very accepting of high levels of violence, both men and women. And also, there were high levels of persons feeling that it was okay to perpetrate violence against a partner. So, yes, healthy relationships and sexual health education should be a part of, what we're teaching, not just persons in that age group all the way through. And it's a part of what the Crisis Center offers in order to create an environment where relationships, not just sex, relationships are safer and healthier for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. And joining us in studio now is Mrs. Cleopatra Christie. I want to say good morning to her. And I want to say thank you to you guys for joining me this morning. Today is the big day. And I just want to say I feel special because I know that you all also have to go and spend time, share time, engage in activities with the Office of the Spouse and the spouse of the Prime Minister. And so we say thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to have Ms. Christie here. She can take all the hard questions from now on.
Good morning, Ms. Christie. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to need you to speak directly into the mic.
Just right here. Pull, push.
Extend it. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right.
All right. So please introduce yourself and tell us what your role with the Crisis Center has been over the last 40 years.
Gee. Yes, good morning to you. I'm Cleopatra Christie. I am the administrator at the Bahamas Crisis Center, and I've been holding that post for the past 3 years as administrator, just the day-to-day operations, making sure that things are going as they should. Clients are receiving the kind of attention they deserve, going to court, and just running the crisis center here in New Providence, and also setting up the new branch of the Bahamas Crisis Center in Abaco. So it's been a busy time for us at the Bahamas Crisis Center.
Oh, wow. Setting up a new branch in Abaco. I am excited because Abaco needs a crisis center. I mean, there's no denying it.
Yes, we're very excited about that new venture. It's been on the drawing board for some time, but unfortunately, it takes money, time, resources, all sorts of things to get this up and running.
Yes.
But we've been fortunate from last year, about September, we got a small grant. We've been able to hire 2 persons, 2 very qualified Bahamians who are in charge. And from our role here in the Bahamas, in Nassau, as it relates to Abaco, is that we pay a monthly visit to make sure that things are going well. We're getting our clients in touch with the police, the courts, and all of that. So we're very excited about this new venture.
Look at it. I am overjoyed, particularly after months after Dorian. In the midst of the recovery, there's this story coming to me from several different directions. A teacher, desperate for help, trying to highlight that there was a group of young people who were left to take care of themselves in Abaco. And through the support of the community, the support of the church, and their own resilience, they were taking care of themselves. And so to see now that the Crisis Center has been able to establish a space in Abaco, it means that they can lend support to the people in Abaco who should be taking care of these young people.
You're quite right about that, and I don't want to change the topic today, but with Abaco, that was the thrust of our getting there and getting up and running, the children in particular. So we are very active in a couple of the schools there. And we've had conducted last year in August a camp for the children of Dorian, as we call them. And so it's coming along. We still need the support, and we're pushing every day and encouraging our employees, the two women who look after the center there, just pushing on and trying to do the best that they can in the circumstances. Remember, Abaco is a vast island.
Yes, huge.
And lots of problems.
Absolutely. So it sounds like we need an income-generating mechanism for the Crisis Center.
Oh, that too.
There's so many things that we need, right? I think we need shelters, and I think every shelter and living facility that we have should have an income-generating mechanism attached to it, right? Like a wash house or a press, like to press iron clothes, or a processing center. But I have an idea I want to throw out there to you guys. I have recently come into a massive amount of wealth. I'm talking like billionaire status. I am now a mahogany billionaire.
Congratulations.
I have found mahogany. Did you know that there's mahogany everywhere in the Bahamas and New Providence? Like everywhere. And I'm going to become a millionaire, and I would like to share this with the Crisis Center. So I was thinking of this idea. The Crisis Center needs a souvenir program. Like you need to partner. We've got to partner all the time, but we need to find someone to partner with who will be give the initial startup cost, so that people can join the program and make souvenirs from natural resources, things like mahogany, not the tree itself, sustainable harvesting, but the pod that we use to make bush tea with, the seeds from the poinciana tree, the flamboyance tree. I mean, there are tons of things that we could be using raw materials to make souvenirs for our Newport venture, especially since with the reimagining of the wharf, there will be strict attention paid to locally produced products with local raw product, right? And so I want to throw that out there, that we're going to start a souvenir program for the Crisis Center to be able to have a steady, if not small, a steady income generating mechanism to support the work and then to support the building of other small income generating mechanisms.
In addition to that, it would also, it could provide a source of employment for women. And remember, a great deal of the women that we come into contact with, they're unemployed and been so for a long time. They're struggling, nowhere to live. So it's really a challenge for many single women in this country. And so generating income and a source of work that they can get involved with would be really, really helpful.
You going to say something?
Yes. How you doing, by the way, Miss Christie? You mentioned challenges of women in general in terms of poverty and impoverished. And I would like to know, how does the Crisis Center partner with Ministry of Social Services to enable and empower women who are going through such things?
Well, the Ministry of Social Services is a great partner with the Crisis Center. We do many projects with them. And in fact, they are the source of our income. We receive a small stipend from them on a yearly basis, and it is through that stipend that we're able to keep our doors open. We only have like 3 persons in the office, and so it is that income that's our major source of income, in addition to grants that we may receive from time to time and all of that.
And sometimes when I hear beating upon the government, right, I have to I remind myself when I was a full-time LGBTI advocate, I tell people, listen, the government has been my biggest ally. The government has been my biggest support. And while you think, sometimes you're looking at the situation, you think the government ain't doing anything, they don't seem to care. While at that sort of policy level, they are unable to speak or actors can't engage right away, there are other resources that the government can use to support the work of NGOs and advocates, and financial support is a big, and I think, we have to say thank you to the government for even if you was just paying lip service, you paid the check. Even if you didn't really have the capacity, and it's important, the capacity to care about the work that they were doing right then, you ensured that the work could continue. And for that, we are grateful.
Yes, and the thing is, it isn't what we want. It's a one big pie, and we're getting a small chunk of that pie. It isn't what we want, but we make it work.
Yeah.
And I guess the nonprofit person, I want to say that, donations are, important.
A big part, yeah.
A big part and important to the crisis center. So if you, are looking for somewhere.
Give them a number to call.
Absolutely. The hotline is 328-0922, but the office number is, oh my goodness, I need to look it up.
Listen, all we're saying is before you come and invest in my mahogany doubloon empire.
322-4999 for the office, and you can call there between 9:30 and 5. You can catch Ms. Christie or Ms. Roll during that time, or 24/7, like I said, at the hotline. So.
Yes, and I so appreciate me being invited to be on this panel to ask my tough questions, which, when you have girl children and a wife to take care of, and you have persons who are advocates, so you want to engage. I want to appreciate the Crisis Center as, is it an advocacy group or is it a response group? And a reason why I asked that, just before you came in, I was asking Ms. Wilson regarding this changing. And Erin is going to go in detail of explain what exactly I mean. She's one with the words of definitions of rape. I understand what rape is, right? And now I'm seeing that this word of sexual assault is being used and it's being pushed forward. I don't understand what sexual assault means because it seems to have such a varying meaning. Because I thought sexual assault started from just touching someone.
Exactly.
And then moving, it can't be rape. It just can't be rape. And I want to know, as a crisis center, do you as an organization plan to push back, to complain, plan to agitate, plan to say, hey, you are confusing the Bahamians in regard to what this rape is and in fact diminishing what it is to some people? Just my question.
I think there's probably an advocacy answer and a legal answer. So I'll take the advocacy answer and
if I could,
pass the legal to...
The way I framed it, because I want to tuck in my second part. What is the response to the shifting of language in the legal and political space, where we've shifted from the use of rape to sexual assault, and also where they've shifted the language in the offense from statutory rape to unlawful sexual intercourse. And so, we want to know your response, legal, advocacy, personal, professional. If you can give it, if you can't, we understand.
So the rape versus sexual assault, I'll tackle that first.
Yeah.
So sexual assault is a larger umbrella, and like Mr. Nuri said, it starts from non-consensual touching and even harassment, targeting of somebody, and goes all the way down the spectrum to rape. Whereas rape is very specifically the non-consensual penetrative act. So when you penetrate someone or engage in anything that with consent might be considered as sex, because there's also oral, which generally would also be considered within the umbrella of rape from an advocacy sense. And the broadening of that language in the activist spaces was largely in response to a recognition that we needed to expand people's ideas of what is a violation of someone's person. People kind of there was a perception at a time where if it stopped short of rape, then it wasn't so.
Happened,
Then it didn't happen, or it wasn't so bad, and so there was like within the movement, this broadening out of the term sexual assault. Now that's been a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it has spurred all of these conversations about consent, as muddy and even vitriolic as some of them have gotten to be, but that's an important conversation that we had to have. But on the other hand, in some ways it's been adopted into spaces where it's used to water down the impact of the word rape.
Now, here's another, I think, intersection that we rarely talk about, right? In the article from the Nassau Guardian, Monroe excessive sentence in sex case, which was published on the 1st of April 22. Monroe says he makes some statements that we all got very upset about, right? He said things like, Monroe argued that having sex with a person under the age of consent, quote unquote, is not rape, and said that he does not understand the controversy over the issue. Let's be fair to him. Quotation, it's not rape, he said. The issue is that you're being punished because the person is under the age of consent. Monroe added the charge was unlawful sexual intercourse, which means that it's not rape, right? Now, I could be honest with y'all. As soon as I read that, I flop about and almost break up my table. There is a space there, though, right, where we recognize that a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old is a sexual being. Their body functions. They are sexually aroused. They can reproduce, right? Well, they're sexual beings. And maybe a 13-year-old and a 13-year-old should can engage in sexual intimacy without it being this massive thing, right? Like when we say that, look, you're under the age of 16, you cannot consent, right?
So I think you need to underline that.
Yeah, let's go
Under
there.
the age of 16, you cannot consent. And so we don't call it rape, we call it unlawful sexual intercourse. Now what you're doing is you're getting into an area where the law defines all of these words.
Yeah.
What's unlawful sex? And what's sexual assault? All of these words are defined in the law.
Yeah. See, I don't have a problem. I mean, I don't think a 13-year-old girls, boys should be in sexual intimacy. I don't think they should do. 13, 14, 15, 16? No, you shouldn't. I think there's a big difference between a 13 and a 14-year-old engaging in sexual intimacy and a 25-year-old man, a 30-year-old man, a 40-year-old man or woman grooming a child to feign a relationship, to engage in sex. I think that we can recognize that 13, even 12, 13, 14, they begin this, their puberty, their bodies change, they come into their sexual beings, they are sexual beings, and we acknowledge that they have sexual desire and they will engage with each other. The laws are not to necessarily punish them for that behavior. The laws are to protect them
Right.
from adults that should know better,
Right.
that should not be grooming young children for
It's meant to protect them
relationships.
from predatory behavior. Ultimately. And once again, I think that Ms. Christie is better equipped to discuss the legal
Yeah.
with regard to that. And for the most part, that particular, lexical change is within the legal space. I think in most advocacy spaces, we still call it statutory rape.
Because and I think it should still be called statutory rape. I think we lose the
Poignancy of it.
and the purpose of the law is lost if we don't call it statutory rape. And I think commentary coming from the minister and commentary subsequent to the discussion shows us clearly the dangers of not being very tight with the language, not being very specific with the language, and not having these conversations with the Bahamian public, with stakeholders, and in particular with young people.
I'm good. I just don't understand the meanings at all. So I look at it more like he touched her inappropriately. I don't know what else it is. And
Well, you see, when you talk about-
because I'm not familiar with legalese, nor am I going to pursue it to be familiar with it. I understand what rape is. I understand that with touching in school we call it palming. So if they say sexual
Call it
assault,
what?
palming is a term.
PALM.
Touching inappropriately.
Yeah.
So when I heard the term sexual assault, I assumed more like he touched her someplace, and that's that.
Right.
No.
I don't readily think it.
Well, something like attempted rape can be sexual assault, and often sexual assault. I mean, just statistically, I would say probably a lot of when people use sexual assault, they are euphemizing something rather than actually
All right, I got
using it for the
Correcting
lesser
violence
end of
or
the.
taking away the violence of
Yeah.
it. Yes.
So-
I understand.
I got a text here. Oh, go on, Miss.
Or is it a way of sort of throwing in and recognizing a number of offenses that occur? So we say rape is a sexual assault, indecent assault is equivalent to a sexual assault. We say incest, sexual assault. So it's just a word that conveys a conduct that you've had with a victim without their consent.
See, here's something interesting I learned while I was being bad. You know the song George Simmons had eight babies, where his wife liked to be on the dock? Anyway, I used to sell fish, so it's something I learned while I was selling fish. Apparently, in parts of the Bahamas, it's like men have they moved around the conversation of age of consent, right? Like they operate in ways that disregard, like they acknowledge the law, but they operate in sort of ways that disregard the law. And then so I learned about this practice. They don't ask how old you are. They ask what your weight is, right? Like if you hit a certain weight, that means that you are now viable for sexual intimacy. You see the look on your face?
It sounds dangerous out there for chubby girls. What? I was a chubby girl, so am I personally concerned?
Which means it is dangerous out there for a significant number of young Bahamian women who tend to look older than they actually are, whether it's due to diet or family medical history, right?
Or just genetics.
Right. And so it is a troubling thing, Mr. Nuri, right? The man them say, a friend of mine, a fisherman who is now passed, I could say, he tell me this, right? He say, yeah, we gone to the island, and the guys them talking, and these young women came on the port, and he look at this boy, and he say, but my boy, like, these are young things, these are green mangoes. It's the same language he used. These are green mangoes. He say, yeah. We don't care about the season. It's the weight of the grouper. Right? It's the way. This is the language that people are using out there, Mr. Nuri. I think it's important for men. See, because men will sit and say, good men who don't engage in this type of language, it's foreign to them, would look at me and say, man, Erin, you talking foolishness. Man don't talk like that in the Bahamas. And then I have to say, not the men that you interact with. You know?
Well, that's something new. I've never heard of
Yeah,
that
I've never
before.
heard it before.
Now,
I learn something new every day.
I am familiar with men using the excuse, well, she looks older. She said she was 16 or 17.
She don't act like she's 13.
Right. You know, and she say yes, and she consented and all of that. But I've never heard of using that criteria, the weight, to make a determination as to whether you can proceed.
And I think that we've all out here, everyone here has at some point in time heard someone talk about these fast gals. So I feel as if that's also a big excuse that we hear people talk about. These fast gals, these little gals, just too womanish, these kinds of things, too fresh. And this is victim blaming.
Yeah.
Like this is 100% victim blaming. And unfortunately, we have a really robust culture of victim blaming. And it's a huge problem because not only does it discourage persons who have been violated from coming forward, it makes it easier like so much easier and more acceptable for violence to be perpetrated against vulnerable people. 13-year-old girls are vulnerable people. Like, it doesn't matter how sassy they are on their TikTok. They are vulnerable people and being taken advantage of, like, by your 20 and 25 and 30-year-old men and older sometimes, and women. It goes both ways.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
They need to be protected against that, and we shouldn't have a shield of, oh, she was fast, to excuse ourselves from protecting those young girls, those young boys.
And since, again, this is International Women's Day, and then we have a second part of the show, I am prepared to extend that second part just so we can continue the conversation, if you have time, by the way, because I know we have 5 minutes more. But I want to speak regarding the NGOs, NPOs, non-profit organizations, in terms of women's advocacy, in terms of speaking out on behalf of defending women publicly. And it seems as if, and just for me, that there aren't enough women's group who are out in the forefront saying this is foul. We are speaking on behalf of women, that this discriminatory practice or this discriminatory word being used in the public, we won't stand for, and we will lend our shoulders to make sure we don't stand for it. And I want to know if there are groups like that in the Bahamas who speak loudly and clearly that we're not tolerating such.
So, yes, there are. I will say that there's never enough. There is never enough.
Let me say this before you start. After the passing of Mrs. Donna Nichols, there has not ever been a voice as loud. My voice ain't never been as loud as Donna's voice, and we remember Donna as being that person, Mr. Nuri, right? Even when the crisis center wasn't prepared, not to say they not prepared, they weren't ready, right? Donna stand on her own and speak. And so we remember Donna for that fire that she brought all the time. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'd love to have that moment to remember Donna. She was a big part of all of our lives and our advocacy, and she deserves to be remembered as the fierce woman that she was.
Right,
but to your question, yes, there are nonprofits out there advocating for this. Aside from the Crisis Center ourselves, who've throughout decades been at the forefront of many of the major legislative and policy changes on behalf of women, gender-based violence, intimate partner violence throughout the last 4 decades. There's Equality Bahamas, who had the International March this past weekend. There is Women United, which I think is actually a coalition of different organizations who were very vocal what was that, about September of last year with regard to the marital rape, the delays on marital rape, and their feelings as if there was not enough commitment.
By DC.
Yeah,
I want to make the point that Equality Bahamas is attempting to take over from the Crisis Center in terms of policy engagement and development and advocacy. And Ms. Wallace is really, and it's a good, I think it's a good thing because it now allows Crisis Center to focus
on services
and other areas, because policy development is so very, very important. You don't really feel it until you get into it.
And I want to say that there also have been a number of other women's groups that have partnered with these. These groups have been in the forefront, but have partnered. So we have the Zonta, we have all of the Greek women's organizations. Your Deltas,
the sororities,
exactly. That have been amazing partners to Crisis Center, to Equality Bahamas, etc. So.
Absolutely. Let's take this call just before we go. Good morning, caller. I am sorry, caller. Sorry about that. So, Nuri, any more text there?
No.
Okay, good. I let Mr. Nuri be in charge of the text this morning because I in my feelings. So first of all, we need the Donna Nichols Memorial Lecture, right?
I love it.
And then we need the souvenir program. And coming from a perspective of the Crisis Center, Mr. Nuri, you've been raising these conversations about whether the government has declared something a crisis, right? Is it a crisis until the government declares it a crisis? I'm very interested in that space, right? Like, when will the government allow NGOs to make the declaration, right? When will they listen to us and we say, look here, it's a crisis. It doesn't become a crisis when the political directorate sees that it's a crisis. it's a crisis, and we need to be enabled to respond to these crises well before you are prepared to do that. And if you allow us to do that, then you will never have to respond to the crises yourself. But further to that, in the next hour, hopefully, Cecil, we could talk about shelters. But more importantly, that people who are in crisis need support. And so that if you're taking an unhoused or homeless person and putting them in a temporary or a housing program, that we also need to have a support officer, right? There needs to be a support program, because we knew that they were in crisis when we put them in here. And we shouldn't expect them to operate like everything is just healed now that they have a place to live, you know? And I really want to, I guess what I'm gonna have to do is become a part of the crisis center, so that then I could engage in that work, because y'all are all busy doing all of the other work, right? And I think
we welcome you volunteers, especially passionate ones.
All right, so Mrs. Christie, I know that you guys have a wealth of things to do today. Are you able to join us for the
15 minutes.
Just 15 minutes?
All right, that's fine.
An additional 15 minutes, yes.
Okay, great.
All right. I think I saw something that said refreshment, so I agree.
Refreshments.
We have to rush you.
I understand. We're talking about the Office of the Prime Minister having refreshments today.
Oh.
Yeah, it's International Women's Day there, but
I like free food, so that's where I go.
I've been waiting all year for this.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to be honest. Let's go to this caller just very quickly. Caller, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Just a question.
Yes.
Could you give me your opinion on if you do support a family structure? I'm sure you would have grown up with your dad and mom. Just want to know what's your opinion, and do you support family structure with a father and a mother?
Listen,
Thank
I
you.
absolutely support family structure, right? I absolutely support family structure. A child is born from a mother and a father, and the child needs to know their mother and the father, and they should be able to live with their mother and the father. And I can be honest with you, even if it's a weird relationship like two mummies and a daddy, the most important thing is the child need to know their mommy and they need to know their daddy. They need to be supported by a unit. I can take it even further. I think that y'all slunk in with the nuclear family unit. I think y'all know that it's wanting and you need better. And I think we need to get back to the extended family unit. And I think that y'all ain't serious about it, because y'all don't even build homes to accommodate the extended family unit. I with you. Children need their mommy and their daddy. And we need an economic system, like a national economic system that enables children to spend significant amounts of time with their mommy and their daddy, no matter what the dynamic is. Now, if they could live together, I love that even more. They don't even have to live in the same bedroom, but it has to be in the same house, and it has to be with respect and manners and decency and boundaries, right? All of that. I with you, caller. I with you. Children need their mommy and their daddy, and when they don't have a daddy, they need to know that they came from a man, and whoever that person is, he is important. And we should try and make a way for them to figure out who that is, because people need to know who they are and where they're from. These are all important things. Anyway, you guys stay tuned. I gotta let Mr. Cecil Nuri take over the reins for the second hour, but I trust him. He's a good man. I don't know if he makes stew fish, but he's a good man. Anyway, you're on the clock, Guardian Radio AM mashup with representatives from the Bahamas Crisis Center, and we will be right back in the 11 o'clock hour.